Hello, I'm Graham Horton. Welcome to this video. Now this video is at the request of a viewer who is having problems with the electronic viewfinder of the Panasonic FZ80 82 camera. And he said there are several other complaints on some of the forums on the web, like dpreview.com, that state that they've got the same problem. So he's having a problem when he looks into the viewfinder. He's not seeing a magnified screen. What he's seeing is something that looks like a theatre screen several feet away. That would tend to suggest that we've lost the magnifying lens within the viewfinder, which enlarges the image from that small LCD screen. I also want to take the advantage of, while I've got the camera stripped down, to have a look at why we need to lock the EVF adjustment. As you can see on my camera here, I use tape to hold that in place, because every time you use the camera, the EVF adjustment is out, so that it goes out of focus. You lock it in place, use the camera for a couple of times, go back to the EVF, and you find that it's blurry. So I put tape over there to stop that diopter adjustment moving. So I want to investigate why that happens, and if there's a fix we can apply to it, or some remedy for that. So I'm going to strip the camera down and we're going to have a look inside. I've got some tools here on the desk which I'll be using. I've got a small flat bladed screwdriver. A cross point screwdriver is actually the JTS, or Japan Technical System screwdriver, designed for camera threads, but a normal 00 cross point will do. Some tweezers and a pry tool just in case I need that. So I'm going to strip the camera and we'll go through the procedure of getting into the camera, what you need to be looking out for, some of the hints and tips I developed over the years, taking cameras apart, putting them back together again, that I've learned, and I'll show you what to do. So let's get started. The first thing to note is that when I do take a camera apart, I will take a view. I've got a sheet of paper here with all the positions of the screws that I know that I'm going to have to take out, and then I will put them on the sheet as I take them off, so I know exactly where they are. Now, you think your memory would be good enough so that you remember that the upper left hand screw was that and the bottom right hand screw, but there are so many different thread types on these cameras that it's important not to cross thread them when you put them back in place. So I've got this system here where I stick them onto double-sided tape on the sheet of paper, so I know exactly where I am when I'm going to put the camera back together. So let me start to disassemble this camera, and I'll put the screws on the sheet as we go along. So the first thing to do, if you've got a battery in there, is obviously remove it. You don't want the battery in place when you're taking the camera apart. And if there's any other memory card in there, things like that, take those out. So I'm going to start by taking out the screws which will hold the back to the camera. And on the Panasonic cameras, there is normally a plate which I'll point out to here in the hot shoe, which needs to be removed to gain access to screws. It's typical of all the Panasonic cameras that they have a little plate that slides over 4 cover screws, 2 normally hold the back and 2 hold the hot shoe to the camera body. So we need to remove that plate as well. So we'll go through the process and see how far we get. So let me start taking out the screws. I'm going to start with the upper left. Normally just push hard into the screw head so that you don't have a stripped thread, and then I will place this onto the sheet of paper where it's marked upper left, so I'll just stick that there. And then my next one is right upper, so I'll go to the other side of the camera and I'll take out the right upper screw. And it appears to be the same thread as the other one, but again it's better to stick them in place so you know exactly where they're going. My next one is right lower, so into the base of the camera, and I'm going into the right lower, so this is this one. Now that is definitely a different thread to the other one, so we'll place that on right lower, and then my next one is bottom left, so we'll take out this screw and place that on my sheet of paper. And then we've got bottom right, so that's going to be the case screw. And then we're going to remove this plate from the hot shoe, and normally it just lifts up from the front. From what I remember, or does it come out from the back? It's a while since I've taken these apart. Oh, it lifts up from the back, that's how you do it. It'll lift the back 2 times up. Like so. We can just slide that plate out. And that gains access to these 2 screws here at the back which hold the back in place. So I'm going to remove that. So that's the hot shoe right. Let's just take that out. Stick that on the paper and then take out the hot shoe left. Again, use the tweezers and I'll stick that on the paper. So now I've got all the screws out, I'm going to start to disassemble the camera, and normally it just splits across all the seams, but you need to be aware that inside will be some ribbon cables, so be gentle how you take the camera apart, look where the ribbon cables are, and then you must disconnect them before continuing. So I'm going to start to open the camera up down the seams. I'll use this plastic device just to open up the camera. So now I should be able to remove the camera. Let's go to your overhead, so I can remove the back gently, and you can see there inside I've got 2 ribbon cables and they're attached to the motherboard, so I need to disconnect those. Try and just get a better view from the other camera. And just zoom back a little bit. You can see I've got a ribbon cable here which goes to the upper buttons, and a ribbon cable here which will go to the LCD screen. So both of those need to be disconnected. And on the ribbon cable connectors, I just point out here, there is a black locking lever which needs to be released on both of those to release the plate. And you need to be gentle lifting those off. You don't want to break those levers, because if you break that, that's game over. That locking lever will not ever close the contacts on the ribbon cable again. So it's just a case of lifting that up like that and lifting the one up on the LCD like so. And now we can safely remove the ribbon cable from each of those connectors, and you can remove the back like so. So here we have the EVF diopter adjustment, and you can see the EVF screen here. So this is the EVF. We've got a plain lens, and behind that will be the magnifying lens to look at the LCD screen within the camera. So this is the diopter adjustment which we will turn to adjust the inner lens. So I'm just going to turn that, and I can feel some sort of detent adjustment. So that's probably either a spring-loaded ball or something like that. I've seen that device used in other cameras, which stops this rotation, but it's very free to turn. So it looks as though that ball doesn't detent very well. But as I turn the diopter, you might just be able to see in the lens there, it moves the magnifying lens backwards and forwards. I'm just going to have a closer look at this lens on the front to see whether, if this can drop out, it would actually fall in the camera, and whether that's what the viewer is seeing. I'm just trying to see how it's fastened. It looks as though it could be actually glued into that mount. Can't actually see any. Oh, there could be a plastic clip there, or is that a latch to hold it in? Alright, don't see anything. So what I'm going to do is take apart this ratchet assembly to see just what is in there. So I don't know whether you can notice there's a small screw within that mount, so I'm going to remove that screw just to see what is inside that fitting. So let's remove that and let's see what's in there. So I'm taking out the screw, and it's a collared screw. You notice there's a collar on it, so let me put that on the sheet, and then I'll remove this and see what we can see inside. If I turn that around, you can probably see there is a spring and a ball there. I just tilt that up if I can get it in focus. Just there is a spring and a ball, and that is the one that will be given the detent for this operation. And I suggest to look at this with a magnifying glass in a little bit more detail. Yeah, there are serrations on there which I guess that ball is going to rotate against. Now it is covered in grease. Now I would think that for a detent you wouldn't want grease, because that's going to allow this to move fairly easily. Let me just look a little bit more about this unit, see how it operates. So I'm going to remove that spring and the ball so they don't fall out. So let's put it on the piece of paper. It's a very, very small spring, and there's the ball. Last thing I want to do is lose the ball, so there it is on the paper. So you can probably see on here that's the pivot for the diopter adjustment, which is this device, and the actual control for the lens appears to be this slider here. So that will move the lens backwards and forwards within the diopter. Just check that. Yeah, that is the one. So there's the, those are the detents which that ball will run in, and then opposite that will be, so that is going to be in the camera that way around. So it's going to be this area which is going to drive the lens. So let me just try that in position. Yeah, you can see that as I'm moving that, it is driving that lens backwards and forward. So unless there's some restriction on here, it's going to move very, very easily. What I'm going to do first of all is to actually remove that grease from within there, as I reckon that is going to make it far too easy for that ball to slip from detent to detent. So one moment please. I just removed the grease using a little bit of methylated spirits to take the grease off those detents within this diopter adjustment. So what I'm going to try and do is to assemble the spring and the ball within the groove here which this thing rotates in, and then we'll see if that's made any improvement whatsoever. So I'm going to try and do this by assembling the ball and the spring, so I just don't want to lose the ball. So I'm going to put the ball in that groove first of all, so that's where the ball would go, and then the spring needs to be located behind that. I'm just going to turn this around so I can manipulate it. Right, so that's the spring and the ball located back in that slot, and now we need to gently coax the diopter adjustment, which must be somewhere. Here he is. So I'm going to slide the lens to the front, and then we'll install this over the spigot. Like so, and then I just need to just stop that ball coming out whilst I gently turn that in position. Right, that's in there. I'm just temporarily going to install that screw so it doesn't jump out. So that's the diopter adjustment back installed, and to my feel it is slightly stiffer. Now whether that grease was making that detent too easy to move, just make sure that the diopter is still adjusting, that's fine. Still, to my mind, a little bit too slack, but it does feel marginally tighter than it was before, so whether that's going to be enough to stop it moving as the camera moves, the proof will be in the pudding, as they say. I'm going to take a much closer look at this lens assembly to see if I can find out the reason that some of these users are finding that the diopter is slipping. So I'm going to take a much closer look to see how this is. You never know, but I just really can't see any reason why that should happen. Now I could remove the complete EVF assembly. It seems to be clipped in, but I don't think that would give us any further clues, so I'm just going to clean that rear lens before I assemble it. Just check it out. It's lovely and clean. And now, now I'm going to reassemble the camera and test it out. Just looking over the camera inside, see if there's any other things of note. It's got the main lens assembly here with its ribbon cable. So the sensor would be on this plate here, which would be accessible for cleaning if you removed all those ribbon cables. The last screw is probably just underneath the motherboard, so you might have to remove the motherboard to gain access to it. So cleaning the sensor, I can see springs on here, so the alignment will be critical, and that's why they use a collimator device to align the sensor. So if you were to take this apart, getting the thing back in focus and align correctly might be problematic, so probably not one of the most advisable things to do. So I would leave cleaning the sensor if you ever have the situation. The rest of it looks standard. So yeah, let me reassemble this and let's test it out. So assembling these ribbon cables, make sure that the latch is in the upper position, and then just take your tweezers and push the connector back into the plastic, and you can push down the latch and lock it in place. Just going to temporarily put the camera back together again without putting any screws in there, like so. I'll install the battery. I'll turn on the camera. The EVF is working and the LCD is working, so that's a good indication. I'll just set a menu up on there like so, and then I can look at that in the EVF and adjust the sharpness using that wheel. So if I'm going to look into the EVF, to remove my black tape because I can't get access to the wheel now. And I can adjust that. I'll get that into its sharpest position, and now I'll shake the camera around, which would normally lose that position. So I'm shaking the camera quite vigorously, and that EVF is still in position, so that looks as though that actually might have cured that problem. So let me give it a real good shake up and down, and that's still in focus, so I'm thinking that might be a good fix. Let me really shake it, and it's still in focus, so I'm thinking that is really. So even vigorously shaking that, once that diopter is set, it is holding in position. Now I couldn't do that before. So all that remains now is for me to reassemble the camera by putting the screws in. Sequence is on my paper here so I can get the right screws in the right hole. So hope you found that useful, and if you've got the same problem with your FZ8082, you can see that it's a fairly challenging job to get that spring out of that diopter adjustment, but if you're used to working with small tools, it's something you could do and remove that grease from that detent with maybe methylated spirits or something like that. Try reassembling it and see if you get a success like this one. So until the next video, thanks very much for watching. Please do take care, and I hope to see you all very, very soon. Goodbye for now.